In the year 2048, our planet finds itself in a dire situation, overpopulated and stripped of its natural resources. Hope seems futile until the government implements a radical plan: genetically modify a group of 14 soldiers to start a new civilization on Saturn's moon, Titan. Among these brave volunteers, we have the equally courageous former pilot Rick, accompanied by his wife Abigail, a doctor, and their child, Lucas. The head of the program, Dr. Collingwood, views Rick as a valuable asset to the mission, citing his impressive survival skills as a testament to his unwavering determination. While Rick and Abigail endure this challenge for the sake of their child's future, Abigail confides in Collingwood, voicing her concerns about Rick's well-being. Collingwood, however, reassures her that proper care will prevent any potential sickness. Once the volunteers have settled in, they attend a meeting led by Collingwood to begin the treatment process. During the presentation, Collingwood explains the dire state of our planet, highlighting Titan as the only viable option due to its atmosphere and primordial ecosystem. However, with its liquid methane oceans, toxic nitrogen-rich atmosphere, and unbearable cold conditions, living on Titan requires something extraordinary. That's why the government has opted to genetically modify humans to adapt to Titan's hostile environment instead of terraforming the moon. As the program progresses, we watch with bated breath, hoping that the modification process will succeed and forge a new path for humanity. As Collingwood elucidated the effectiveness of the clinical trials, a perturbed volunteer expressed their apprehension regarding the possibility of rejection by the bodies to the treatment. While acknowledging the success of the trials, Collingwood cautiously admits that there exists no guarantee of survival for every individual. Nevertheless, the volunteer continues to persist with their inquiries about the program. Without batting an eyelid, Rick firmly rebuffs him, commanding him to depart if he remains averse to the process. The assemblage of volunteers hails from all corners of the globe and were handpicked for their survival of the most dire circumstances. Once the meeting concludes, they receive card keys granting unrestricted access to the base and are ushered to the lab for the first of 300 shots to be administered over the course of the forthcoming weeks. Whilst Dr. Freya elucidates the purpose of each injection, Rick only comprehends a fraction of the jargon. Subsequently, Rick's family establishes a new routine that, albeit nothing extraordinary, will prove paramount. Lucas attends school, Abigail manages their domicile, and, when allowed, she stands alongside Rick throughout his treatments. The volunteers amicably unite and oftentimes congregate beyond the base's walls. As neighbors, they frequently partake in soirees, relishing in the revelry of barbecues and dinner parties. However, discussions can take a somber turn, epitomized when one volunteer confides their fear of being disallowed to return home upon the agreement's conclusion in 2 years' time. Concomitantly, the last hurrah prior to alcohol consumption being prohibited proves an occasion to excessively indulge. An inebriated Abigail experiences dizziness and requires Rick's assistance to ascend the staircase. However, Rick himself soon succumbs to persistent coughs and shortness of breath. Abigail rushes to his side and observes a raging fever, hastily administering medication and tucking him up in bed, where she keeps vigil for the remainder of the night. Not long thereafter, Collingwood relays great admiration for the volunteer's DNA progression, indicating a substantial test is imminent. The troop was summoned to traverse the watery depths, sans essential oxygen supply. As the clock ticked past the half-hour point, only Rick and Tally remained in the game, morphing the activity into a whimsical contest. Tally emerged victorious at 39 minutes underwater, yet Rick's endurance continued to astound. So much so that he even found himself coasting through the pool like a sprightly cetacean. Rick's unorthodox swimming style amazed onlookers as he propelled himself forward at a remarkable velocity, moving his fins with an ease that rivaled that of a dolphin. In the evening, Rick decided to showcase his new aquatic move to his son in their garden pool. Afterwards, he lovingly tucked Lucas in for the night, but to his surprise, the topic of his late grandfather was brought up. Lucas firmly believed that his grandfather would have adored the aquatic spectacle. Rick, appreciating the sentiment, chose to indulge in some frisky water playtime with his wife, Abigail. However, their swimming efforts were momentarily halted when Abigail noticed some peculiar black veins on Rick's body. Despite her reservations, Abigail chose to dismiss the alarming discovery. Days later, the volunteers underwent their first surgery, and one of the wives, Rayanne, paid Abigail a visit to arrange a playdate for their children. However, upon arrival, Rayanne's anxiety was palpable, and she expressed her fear of her husband's inclusion in the volunteering program. Abigail did her best to comfort her, reminding her that the volunteers had the potential to save humanity, and most importantly, their children. Thankfully, Rick emerged from the surgery in good health and returned home to continue doting on his family. Despite her relief, Abigail couldn't shake the apprehension about the potential side effects listed in the manual. Her concerns were further validated at night when she awoke to find Rick absent from their bed. She discovered him icing his burning skin in the kitchen, bringing her a large bucket of ice-cold water. Rick challenged Abigail to a game, and they both submerged their hands into the container. After a few minutes, Abigail had to withdraw her hands due to the frigid temperature, but Rick left his in, confirming his inability to perceive the cold. The following morning, they embarked on a serene run together, nestled amidst a picturesque view of the area. Rick bemoans his inability to save our precious planet from the perils of pollution. The experiments persist, with volunteers braving arduous challenges, such as running with masks that simulate the toxic atmosphere of Titan and plunging into icy waters for extended periods. While some may surrender to the discomfort and withdraw, Tally exhibits great resolve, braving the frigid elements and stubbornly remaining in the water. Observing her stoicism, Rick teaches her the art of meditation underwater, a skill that benefits her greatly. However, after a testing session, the group discovers an alarming phenomenon. Rick and Tally are losing their hair. Panic ensues as they realize that this may be the result of their exposure to hazardous substances. Their concerns escalate when one of the volunteers succumbs to a violent seizure, unleashing a cascade of blood. The frantic medical team rushes to aid, but to no avail. The group suffers a devastating loss as they mourn their fallen companion. In an attempt to ease their pain, some of the volunteers resort to drinking, even though this goes against the rules. During a heartfelt exchange with Abigail, Tally reveals her fear about leaving for 2 years to provide for Andrew's desire for progeny and becoming a mere good wife. As they dine, Abigail notices something peculiar about the volunteers. Their veins occasionally turn dark. Suddenly, screams permeate the air as they rush to the garden, where Zane is in the grip of a complete mental breakdown, attacking his wife, Rayanne. Undoubtedly, the perilous trials are taking their toll on the volunteers, physically and psychologically. Will they survive the rigors and emerge triumphant? Or will there be more losses to suffer? Only time will tell. The chap swiftly dashed out and pinned Zane to the ground until he calmed down, whilst Abigail escorted Rayanne elsewhere. Come the morrow, Freya graced the neighborhood to distribute additional medicine to the volunteers, preventing them from suffering the same fate as the deceased maiden and Zane. Upon inspecting the dosages, Abigail notices some exceedingly elevated quantities and yearns to confer with Collingwood, but alas, he is not at her disposal. Later, in Twilight's hour, Rick succumbs to projectile vomiting, with crimson blood intermingled. Abigail urges him to take respite while she carts away the remnants. However, when Rick ceases to observe, Abigail seizes a sample of his blood. Subsequently, as she slinks around the abode, ensuring the entryways are secured, Abigail at last spots secret cameras concealed in the house, allowing the program's overlords to clandestinely monitor them 24/7. As Rick took his dip in the pool, he couldn't help but notice the layers of his skin peeling away. However, the nonchalant fella hardly flinched. It wasn't until Abigail caught a glimpse of Rick's decaying skin and rapidly receding hairline that genuine concern etched into her features. To make matters worse, a sinister darkness began to suffocate Rick's bloodstream, all while the big experiment loomed on the horizon. This extensive surgery aimed to furnish the volunteers' peepers with feline traits for enhanced nocturnal vision. While the procedure ran smoothly, the poor chap had to hobble around sightless for a spell, and his loved ones rallied around him for support. That is, until his muffled cries in agony alerted Abigail to an ocular hemorrhage, sending her and Rick spiraling back into the fray. They take him to the laboratory for another operation, and Abigail approaches Collingwood to inquire about what is happening. She emphasizes that something is alive inside Rick and that she knows about the cameras. Collingwood explains that he didn't want the cameras, but they were a Pentagon order for security. He adds that his blindness is part of the process and assures her that Rick will be fine in a few days. Abigail suspects there's more. He's not telling her, but Collingwood sends her home. Abigail goes home and begins to prepare clothes for Rick, when suddenly she hears sirens. When she goes out, she discovers that the army is surrounding Zane's house. She's not allowed to approach, but witnesses the horrifying spectacle that unfolds. A mutated Zane throws Rayanne out of the window, killing her instantly. Soldiers storm the house and shoot Zane, killing him too. Later at the base, Abigail watches over Rick and hears more soldiers arriving. Since Collingwood will be busy handling the situation, Abigail seizes the opportunity to take Rick's magnetic key and snoops around. After strategically avoiding security, she enters Collingwood's office and finds files indicating that volunteers are infusing their DNA with animal DNA to reach the next evolutionary stage, which Collingwood has named Homo Titanians. Collingwood, on the other hand, holds a discourse with Colonel Solano and representatives from NASA, who unanimously agree to shut down the dubious initiative on the grounds of unvalidated science. The harmony is shattered. Violence permeates the morality of the project, gradually adopting a criminal slant reminiscent of the Nazi regime. Colonel Solano fervently demands the termination of the program, but Collingwood and his consultant apprise that the ultimate decision rests with the ministers of defense, making their departure moot unless stated otherwise. As Freya likewise voices her disapproval and urges Collingwood to reconsider, he cavalierly dismisses her concerns. In due course, Rick is discharged, and Collingwood accompanies him home, assuring that his vision will recover within the next 24 hours. Apparently, the side effects were unanticipated, whereby the heightened senses overwhelmed Zane's faculties, necessitating further surgery. When recalcitrant Abigail at long last confronts Collingwood and demands answers, he eventually confesses to the unanticipated injection of animal DNA into the volunteers. Alas, he concedes that the outcome cannot be predicted. Although he empathizes with Abigail's caution, he avers that the risks were known from the outset, and the new surgery is vital for Rick's survival to Abigail's consternation. The following day, Rick eagerly peeled off his bandages and breathed a sigh of relief as he verified his eyesight was intact. In a shrewd move to sidestep the possibility of bald patches, he expertly shaved his head. As the sun slipped beneath the horizon, Rick was astounded to find that he could perceive every tiny detail in the darkness without any struggle. Without wasting a minute, he uttered the affirmative words the doctor had been waiting for. Collingwood had to conduct the procedure. While the families sat shuttered at home, all the volunteers underwent the surgery, but it turned inauspicious as most of them couldn't make it. There were countless complications. Akin to a theatrical twist, only Rick and Tally were left in a healthy state. The following day, Andrew, Abigail, and Lucas swung by for a visit. To their horror, they found out that Rick and Tally had become mutants who communicated only by touching and a low-frequency transmission that was inaudible to the human ear. Rick pressed his palm against the rigid barrier, a fragile wall shielding him from the world outside. Abigail wept as she watched him, her tears intensifying when Collingwood presented her with Rick's wedding band. In a matter of days, Tally and Rick were set to embark on a journey to Titan. Yet, in the meantime, they were permitted to remain at home. Rick struggled to adapt to human attire, lashing out by accident when Abigail tried to help him. Although he endeavored to comfort her, Abigail recoiled from Rick's touch, now crippled with fear. Rick found solace in the pool, feeling more at ease there than within the confines of his home. One evening, whilst putting Lucas to bed, Abigail caught sight of Tally entering the garden, her hand smothered in blood. Rick, unperturbed, made his way towards Tally and communicated with her through an array of peculiar tendrils that emerged from his fingers. As the army descended upon the neighborhood and discovered Andrew deceased in the shower, Abigail fled upstairs with Lucas, Tally being shot with tranquilizer darts before being brought down. However, Tally sprang to life and, utilizing the tentacles, killed one of the soldiers, prompting the remaining troops to open fire. In an attempt to apprehend Rick, the soldiers were summarily dispatched with ease due to his newfound strength. Rick attempted to drown the last soldier in the pool, but the ruckus caught the attention of Abigail, who emerged to intervene, although it was too tardy. Realizing the magnitude of his actions, Rick absconded. Colonel Solano ordered his team to track down Rick, disregarding Collingwood's request to preserve him as a valuable research subject. Abigail and Lucas were whisked away to the safety of the base. But Abigail's determination led her on a quest to find Rick. With her heart racing, she darted towards their beloved hideaway only to find Rick waiting for her. As she offered her trembling hand in a show of bravery, Rick's tentacles quickly ensnared her wrist, but instead of fear, Abigail's lips met his. Just as the intensity of the moment peaked, the sound of army helicopters shattered their reverie, rendering them unconscious. When Abigail woke up, she found Collingwood by her bedside, explaining that they had to act in her best interests. Unfortunately, the Pentagon deemed their program a failure and planned to transfer Rick to Titan due to the hazardous effects of Earth's atmosphere on his alien body. However, forcing Rick to comply could prove fatal, which is why Abigail was tasked with the daunting challenge of convincing him to leave. Later, Abigail stood before Rick, who was trapped inside a transparent cage. The once brilliant scientist was now just a ticking time bomb that must be defused, and Collingwood recommended a lobotomy-like injection of quetiapine to strip Rick of his memories and faculties. Though Abigail bristled at the notion, her resolve wavered as she feared what would happen if the injection wasn't given. As she watched a soldier retrieve the drug and proceed towards Rick, she surreptitiously dropped it on the floor. When the soldier bent down to pick it up, Abigail seized the opportunity to enter the cage and give Rick the injection herself, knocking him out immediately. When she emerged, she beseeched Freya to follow her and watched as Rick was taken away for the final leg of his journey. However, Rick was merely feigning unconsciousness and swiftly dispatches the assailant. It is at this moment that Collingwood perceives Abigail's cunning plot. She had retrieved saline from a nearby drawer when the guard was preoccupied and administered it to Rick. The enemy forces unleash a hail of bullets, yet Rick dashes into hiding spots that provide him with an advantageous vantage point. Meanwhile, Abigail retrieves Lucas with the aid of Freya, and they locate a concealed exit where they reunite with the gravely injured Rick. Lucas and Abigail embrace him, reaffirming their lack of fear, whilst Freya embarks on a quest to procure medical supplies. Unexpectedly, the armed soldiers converge on their position, and Collingwood commands the women to flee. Failure to comply would result in entire annihilation. Unwavering, Abigail refuses to desert her comrades, and Collingwood orders his subordinates to open fire. However, Solano demonstrates his integrity and bravery by refusing to harm two unarmed females and a defenseless youngster. Instead, he raises his firearm towards Collingwood. The other soldiers follow suit, resulting in Collingwood's capture. Abigail races to Rick's side, and their embrace fortifies his most cherished memories. Eventually, Abigail and Freya transition to researching the Titan II plan, using ethical methodologies to safeguard humanity. Meanwhile, Rick is transported to Titan, where he acquires astounding appendages, wings that facilitate flight within his new abode.